Hi everyone, and welcome to Core Lecture 19. Today we'll discuss revision strategies with a focus on content accuracy. Before we begin, you'll need access to the following materials for today's lecture assignment. You'll need access to your weekly homework document, as well as access to an entry included on your Project 3 rough draft submission. The purpose and goals for today's lecture are as follows. We'll discuss the role of content accuracy as global revision. We'll stress the importance of representing and communicating information accurately, and we'll examine methods for revising for content accuracy. All right, content accuracy. What does it mean and how does it fit within our concerns for revising written work? First and foremost, this is considered a global revision consideration. Recall that with global revisions, as opposed to local revisions, we want to focus on concepts or ideas that will affect the paper overall or the work overall. Recall that with local revisions, those are going to be more or less line edits. Things that if I decide to change a semicolon to a comma conjunction, that really impacts impacts the sentence it resides in. And it doesn't, or arguably wouldn't, have a lot of bearing on perhaps the argument that I use or the way in which my paper is organized. But with global concerns, when we make, global revisions, that can impact how we develop our work overall. So when we think about content accuracy, especially as it relates to incorporating the words and the thoughts of others in our own to either speak to, challenge, or support our own thoughts, we want to make sure that we are representing that information in the most correct and honest way possible. And that's really what we're doing with content accuracy. Now, this is ensuring that all secondary sources are presented fairly and correctly, and you can probably start to make connections between this type of revision consideration and using sources ethically, like we discussed. It's important to note, though, when I say revising to remove any writer bias that may distort a reader's understanding of the source, we can look at that in a couple of different ways. Of course, we can consider our personal biases, so perhaps our immediate gut response to say, yes, I absolutely agree with this source, or no, I very much disagree, what were they thinking? So of course it can apply to that kind of bias, but it can also relate to a bias in understanding, perhaps how you understand a term versus how a source is using the term, or a preference or an understanding of a methodology between how you view that methodology and how your source views that methodology. So you want to make sure that your biases and the information and the knowledge that you have going in are not going to distort how you communicate that source to your reader. So do keep that in mind, that those are a couple different ways in which we can define the term bias. All right, why revise for content accuracy? What good does that do? Honestly, I think this is, especially in today's day and age, perhaps one of the most important things we can be mindful of when we are revising our own work and we are considering how we are representing others. When we revise for content accuracy, really what we're doing is we're circling back to both discussions of the CRAP principles and source ethics, because we are ensuring that we're representing our source with absolute accuracy, or the best accuracy that we can possibly extend. But we are also doing so in a way that represents the work in the ways in which the author wanted that work represented. So when we revise for content accuracy, we are making sure that our readers can make connections between what someone else says and how it supports, or basically how it fits into our own argument, and it demonstrates that we have a good grip on ethics, and ultimately we are making the argument we're making with the best intentions involved. Also, we revise because this builds credibility as a writer and as a researcher. Remember, Aristotle believes that ethos is driving the bus here, much to his chagrin, and much as he would hope that it would be logos. It is in fact ethos. And so when we can go through our own work and ensure that we are representing the words of others accurately and honestly, we are building a trustworthy rapport with our writer or with our readers. We're letting them know, I'm not trying to intentionally mislead you. I'm providing you the information as it exists, and I am explaining how it fits into my own work based off of how the original author communicated and circulated this information. And so when you can do that, even if it's a counter argument, and I think especially when it's a counter argument, when we can, engage with that content in an honest and ethical way and in an accurate way, we let our readers know that they can trust us, that we are not going to mislead them, that we are going to give them the information as it exists, and then we're going to discuss in a transparent way how we see that work connecting with our own. Also, it ensures that you can sustain a scholarly discussion ethically. So when we revise for content accuracy, we're basically ensuring that we are responding in a way that furthers the discussion. It's like if someone were to say, if you were in a, chatting with someone and said, oh, so and so said, what, we should get this kind of ice cream. But then if you relay it to someone else, say, oh, this person wanted a hot dog, like you're not extending the conversation in any way, shape, or form. You're rather embarking on a new conversation because you have inaccurately represented, what someone else has said about food as it relates to ice cream by changing ice cream to hot dog. And so again, you've embarked on this new conversation or this new discussion that can mislead your readers. So, but if you say, oh, someone asked about ice cream, let's continue that conversation on ice cream, you are developing a discussion in a way that speaks to how it was organically formed and the way that it is emerging within whatever discipline that conversation emerges from. All right, so when we think about methods for content accuracy, there are a few ways that we can approach this. First thing that we'll want to do is locate all instances in your text that you cite another source. So go through with a fine-tooth comb, find all of those, introductory phrases in this article or according to so-and-so. Find all those places. Use those as flags to direct your attention to ensure that you are carefully reviewing each instance of when you borrow from another source. Now, it doesn't matter if it is taking the form of a direct quote, a summary, or a paraphrase, and it really can occur anywhere in your paper. Even if you're using a direct quote as a rhetorical device to open your open your essay, or if it is embedded as a form of evidence within the body of your work, doesn't matter. You want to identify all instances in which you borrow from another source. Then what you'll want to do is once you've identified all of those sources, you'll then want to go back and review your notes and annotate a copy of the source's work. Remember that when we discuss reading academic works, it very much, reading academic works successfully is predicated on critical active reading. And so at this point, for the sources that you want to include in Project 3 in your own way, you should have engaged with a discussion that an article was presenting through highlighting, making notes, asking questions, however it is that you decided to go about that. So review that. Make sure that you understood the work correctly the first time. And then as you go through, you want to think critically about why you reacted to the text in the way that you did. So review the questions that you pose. Look at the notes that you made. Assess why you highlighted certain content. So you want to check your understandings of the source, including their argument, method, and conclusion. Go back and say, okay, do I have their argument right? Did I understand it from the beginning? Am I really getting do I fully understand how they conducted this experiment or how they reached these conclusions? You'll also want to check your own biases to ensure they don't cloud your representation of the source. This can be especially important with counter arguments. So if you come across a counter argument that you just vehemently disagree with, it can be tempting to allow, that disagreement and sort of that gut reaction of saying, no, I don't like this, or no, I disagree with this, to guide the ways in which you represent that particular source. So you do want to be aware to say, okay, am I going into this with any preconceived notions either on the author, the topic, or their overall argument? And if so, does my language hinder the reader's ability to understand the source as it is, going back to principles of justice and principles for respect to autonomy, in the way that the original author intended? Or is my bias getting in the way of that? And then this is just a very helpful thing to do, I think, overall. But I would say highlight either through underlining the text, bracketing it, using a legit highlighter, whatever works best. Highlight the ways in which your inclusion of the source accurately reflects their work. So maybe you say, hey, there's a really great line where I think I paraphrase this really well. It gets at what the author is saying, but it contextualizes it really well to speak to my own work. All right, so here's what we're going to do for the lecture assignment. I want you to select one entry included on your Project 3 rough draft. I want you to review or reread the work. So the article, book, chapter, whatever it is that you're citing, I want you to review it. Review your entry for content accuracy and compose a brief write-up, so about 75 words, detailing the following. I want you to discuss your understanding of the work the first time you read as compared to now. Some questions that you can consider. Did you gain a better understanding of what the author was saying? Do you now have a better grasp on some element of their work? Perhaps something that was a little fuzzy the first time around. Has putting their work into dialogue with the others you include in Project 3 changed your understanding of the work? So again, remember, biases, don't just go to the gut reaction, but perhaps maybe a way in which you understand a certain term or idea. And then after reading through more scholarly articles, you can come back and say, oh yeah, now I understand how that source used that term. It makes more sense now. That could be an example of perhaps how reading other sources has influenced your understanding of the work that you've selected for this lecture assignment. I also want you to detail potential biases that may have impacted your representation of the source and its content. Did you adamantly agree or disagree with the author's position? Does the author or work reinforce or challenge a longstanding belief that you may have? Influence that may have influenced your representation of the work. Again, questions that you consider. And then I want you to also have a sample of your current entry draft that demonstrates how you accurately represent the source. So what you can do with this is you can basically just copy and paste it. If you want to just highlight to say, you can highlight or underline some way to visually illustrate where you think you've done a really good job representing that source. All right, so that will do it for Core Lecture 19. You'll want to make sure that you include the Core Lecture 19 summary and assignment in your Week 10 homework submission. Overall, your Week 10 homework submission should include the summaries and assignments for Core Lecture 17, 18, and 19, as well as a mini lecture of your choice. All of that is going to be due to the appropriate assignment folder on Canvas before 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, October 27th. If you have any questions or if there are concepts you'd like to chat about further, please don't hesitate to contact me via Canvas DM. All right, everyone, until next time.